Good day, good people. You're listening to Lifting the Veil with Cari-Lee, and today we are pre-recording a show with Liam Scheff,
It
who
was
is
live.
the who is a fellow Gemini and a lot of fun to talk to, and the author of Official Stories, who's come back to do a pre-recorded show
It
for
was
the
live.
to do a pre-recorded show. It's live right now. For all the good listeners at Lifting the Veil, welcome, Liam. How are you today?
It's great to be on this live broadcast, Cari-Lee.
You're hilarious.
It is. This is definitely going out live. People don't want to know that it's. People want to don't think that it's pre-recorded. They'll think this isn't live. Is the only. Of course, it's live. It's happening right now on your internet radio.
Yes, that's true. For them, it will be live.
It's happening inside of your machine.
There you go. All right. So, for all intents and purposes, it is live for the good listeners of Lifting the Veil.
Thank you.
That sounds very good. All right, moving along. So we were talking about before we decided to start the show, the fact that I've quit smoking, which is why I've got the really deep voice today. It's early in the morning, and yeah, I have Phyllis Diller voice.
It's 4 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. Somebody didn't quit smoking. They've started smoking. That's what's happening.
You know, it's going to be bantered like this back and forth all day, folks. I don't know what to tell you.
It's great that you quit.
Yes.
How long were you smoking?
Years, with like many quits in between. Quits for the pregnancies, quitting for no apparent reason every February for 3 months.
Wow.
3 years in a row, and I constantly am trying. I quit and then I start up because of something stupid.
That's a Frank Sinatra song. It is. Something Stupid. Do you know that one?
No, actually, I don't.
It's a very funny song. It's I think that might be one of the ones he sang with his daughter. Yeah, it is. Nancy. Okay.
All right.
This show, we had a fun show. I began to talk about the HIVIDs thing, as I call it, or HIV/AIDS, as they say in the mainstream media. But I just call it HIVIDs because it works better for me that way. And I had varieties of research on it, and you said, "Why don't we come back and do another show?" And here we are. Before we do, my name is Liam Scheff. I'm a writer, artist, journalist. Go to my website, liamscheff.com. I'm working with my what is it called? Co-partner? What is it called when you have a writer that you're a co-writer with?
It would be a co-writer, wouldn't it be a co-writer?
Yeah, with my co-writer, Scott Taylor, on something called Summer of '74, which is comedy and comics and about Star Wars origin stories. It's a satire. So it's not. I'm not just a one-trick pony. And despite the internet rumors, I'm not a cheap trick either.
Or a pretty face.
Well, not just a pretty. All right.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. He's not just a pretty face. He is a pretty face, but not just.
Well, yeah. And you get older, and that the pretty face thing matters a lot less.
Oh, definitely.
So, though you try to stay healthy, quit smoking. I'm going to take up. I'm not going to take up smoking. I never had a feeling for it.
That's good.
It just the taste was like, wow, this is bad. I mean, I tried it. I was 13. I'm like, people smoke. I'm going to try smoking. I tried it,
and that was awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I know it looks cool, and it does. Everybody complains, don't tell people smoking. Smoking does look cool. That's why people used it in the movies in the 30s and 40s. It fills the air with something that catches light,
Well, to be fair, in quitting, I'm smoking one of these e-cigarettes now, or whatever it is. It's an electric cigarette. It's a vapor cigarette, like a hookah pipe, but with no smoke. It's a sugar vapor, but it's not sugar. It's like yeah. And that's taking away from the hand-to-mouth thing, the whole oral fixation for me.
Oh, interesting. I've always considered, smoking has something to do with that. It's great. It's a great thing to have in a conversation, and you sort of look slightly through your eyelashes. You're sort of, and you have the thing poised maybe to the side of your face or down low, and there's smoke encircling your head, and you get these great images like the Alphonse Mucha advertising paintings for Job cigarettes, which were his wonderful style, which you'd recognize if you look up the last name Mucha. and you get this ring of smoke around you, and then if you have something to say, like somebody's being kind of a pain in the ass, right? And they're arguing with you, and you just look at them through this smoldering thing, and you don't respond immediately. This is the great thing about cigarettes. I'm not advocating cigarettes. I don't like them. But the great thing about them is put it to your mouth, you hold it for a second, and you breathe out, and that's all you have to say if you don't like what they said. You don't even have to argue with them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like a much more polite way of spitting at somebody's comment.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing.
Isn't that bizarre?
You're breathing smoke. You're a dragon suddenly. You're breathing smoke at them, and you're looking through. It has something to do with anger and something to do with a way of expressing and something to do with anxiety and smoldering it, lighting it. There's something about.
This is in no way making me want to have a drag of a cigarette at all.
I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
Take some of those patches, like 6 or 8 of them, and just.
See, now here's the thing. I'm a closet smoker. Let's tell a story here. So I don't smoke in front of my kids because I'm like completely against the idea of my parents used to smoke in the wintertime in the car with me, and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't breathe. The whole car was like full of smoke, right? And they'd put the window down just a little crack, and there you go, it's too cold outside, stop smoking, whatever. So all that secondhand smoke, whatever. I was raised in smoke, so I don't want to do that to my children. But I'm a closet smoker who only smokes after the kids go to bed, which makes absolutely no sense at all whatsoever. So I tried the patch, and it made me crazy because it was too much nicotine all at once, all day long.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, not really. And then I cut the patch in half and thought that would work, and it was still too much nicotine, down to a quarter. I'm just gonna do lots of yoga.
Right. Do lots of yoga and do lots of green tea and green drinks. You need to stimulate all of the cleansing areas of your body. You need to stimulate your mitochondria, and you need to have some adrenal stimulation. So green tea in the morning, yerba mate in the afternoon. I find that when people want to lose weight or they have food addictions, you can have a food addiction. You can just be used to something, and some foods are actually addictive. That's how you know they're really good for you. Like, nobody's ever like, man, if I don't get some broccoli, I'm going to punch you in the face.
You know what my kids did last week? I freaking love them so much. I was cutting up red cabbage, and my son comes into the room, and he's like, Mom, can I have some of that? I'm like, sure, man, here you go. So I cut up a bunch of cabbage, put it in a bowl. My daughter comes running in the room, hey, I want some of that too. Okay. So I cut up her a bowl of raw red cabbage, and not 15 minutes later or whatever, they're coming back in for more. Ha. Some people do say, hey, I really want some red cabbage.
No, but they're right, and they like it, and they know a good thing.
Mm.
But addictive foods give you a feeling of almost, it's an overwhelming feeling of despair that you don't have it. Like
it's true. Sugars are so like that. Sugar gives you that feeling of you need to have more because you have this like sinking sadness or something.
Body hurts. You absolutely need as much as you can of it immediately. Doritos will do that in moments. Man, I really need some Doritos, or sugary snack cakes. Oh man, I need a donut. I need this kind of, man, I need. Now, if you've become attuned to living a healthier life and you have green things in your diet, which I've been fighting with these paleo people for a little while now because they're like vegetables, not all of them, some of them. They'll actually post blogs about how vegetables are dangerous. And
that's not, you know what? I talked to somebody last week about this. He told me that he cut out all vegetables out of his diet. He looks like walking death, mind you, but okay. I listened to him, and I tried to reason with him, but there was no reasoning with him. He thinks vegetables are evil.
Yeah. There's a mental illness going through the West right now because you and I both understand, and we talked about this and understood it immediately, that we both had this point of view, that the Western nations are very young.
Very.
Right, we're a very young country.
Like teenage angst we're going through.
Yes, anything that happens to us will lash out with the violence of a teenager. So when 9/11 happened, of course, the plan was to get us to lash out with the violence of a teenager, which we did. So we've killed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Arabs, and we don't give a damn.
Not at all.
because we're a teenage nation, and anything that happens to us, if you play with our drum set, as in the movie Step Brothers, we're going to beat you up on the lawn because we
Yeah,
told
more or
you not
less.
to play with our drum set.
That's right.
So when we want something as Americans, we actually feel like we're not free if we don't have the ability to have a 72-ounce drink and a 6-pound hamburger that's deep fried in bacon fat. We're not free.
Well, North America, let's just lump North America in there because Canada is just a bit more prudish about hiding the fact that they're like that.
Right. Well, right. Canada was a prisoner of Her Majesty to a greater degree, so she has a little more conservatism in the expression of these things, but it chips away. We're still all North Americans, and we
Indeed.
still have the same bounty. But United States of America is a special case. We're a special case. We've had
I
so
can't argue with that.
we've had so much for quite a while. We're not the America of the 1920s and 30s, hard scrabble. You're used to being batted around a little by life. You're used to the toughness of life. You're not going to complain at every single second. You're just going to get on with things. We were tougher as a nation, but then the 50s happened. The windfall from the victory in World War II, the building of the factory floors, the instatement as the major player on the world stage meant that we'd be the new Roman Empire, and very quickly we're the fattest, sickest nation on earth.
It's just bizarre. Absolutely bizarre to see how, well, you have to sit back and look at it in a timeline to see exactly what it is. And a lot of people don't even want to accept that. There's nothing wrong with America. It's perfectly
No,
fine.
you're supposed to be, and if you try to take my hydrogenated fats away from me, you're taking away my freedom.
Oh, I know. I don't understand that. Like, someone was saying something about them getting, there was an article about them getting rid of Coca-Cola or Pepsi or something to that effect. And there was a big uproar about taking away your rights and freedoms. It's my right to poison myself. Yeah, but really?
Yes, because if you grow up with something, you think that it's normal. And unfortunately, most people around the world live where they live. They don't travel a whole lot. Some people travel more than others. But Americans have a huge country, and the country is Burger King, McDonald's, Starbucks, and the mall from coast to coast. It's the way that it's developed. It developed in the age of oil. It developed in the age of the car, the automobile. Unlike European cities, which have town centers which are accessible by foot, uh, American cities and suburbs are only accessible by car. So it's easy for us to be very sedentary, even as we move. And we have terrible, terrible habits. And now those habits in our minds become, well, this is granted. Well, this is the way this is a drink. Where's my drink? A drink is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is a poisonous drink manufactured by a large industrial quasi-pharmaceutical. I mean, this is a quasi-pharmaceutical, the way that it destroys and hypes your body.
Mm.
And people don't have it and they get upset. Now, I rejected this drink very early. It made me sick. I had to force myself in my teen years to sort of try to get used to it because I considered myself so strange for hating it. And I hated it. And I tried to drink it, and I hated it.
I'm
And
there with you. I used to get migraines and tummy aches, so I stayed away from all caramel colored pops. I think the only pop that I actually drank was a ginger ale occasionally, and usually only when I had the flu or something.
right. Well, my mother, did feel that soda was not good for you. Now, she had a lot of terrible habits, but that was not one of them. I did drink it I had a couple really unhealthy teenage years that I think massively contributed to my just general ennui and the sort of breakdown in the way I was thinking and processing by about 16. It was, I mean, I had so much stress in my life, but I kind of had given up on. I had these concepts of nutrition that were very native to me, but they had been discouraged. My father's second wife was a miserable whore. I'm happy to say that publicly because
Truth, nothing but the truth. You'll never get anything but truth from lifting the veil.
because in your childhood you said, well, you're not allowed to say bad things about the adults, and I was terrified. I think of my own anger and the fact that I disliked her so much. I think almost scared me because somehow I wasn't able to give voice to it because I felt that I would alienate my father. But she was such a violent, crazy, uh, anorexic, bulimic, chain smoking monster that and when I tried to become a vegetarian, she was very critical of me, and I was like, "Well, what am I doing? What is that any?" I just didn't. So I struggled a bit with the fact that I actually liked. Can you imagine? I actually liked being on the healthier side of things.
Imagine that.
So, by the time I was 19, I had bounced back and forth between and among different points of view, and I'd actually gone on what I now understand to be my flirtation with the paleo diet happened when I was about 18 because I was locked up in this crazy school, this Sea-Doo school. I have a documentary about it, and you had no freedom there. And I think in a moment of absolute disgust with everything in the world and myself, and I said, well, screw it. Nothing seems to be working, and I can't get out of here until I'm graduate because this is a prison. I'll just eat meat now. And I had been a vegetarian for a while. I was much happier as one. And I ate meat, and I gained 25 pounds, and I just felt like a phony and like just disgusting and disgusted, and I just hated it. And then I turned 19, and I was at college I went to for a semester, and there was a woman showing a movie, really nice lady showing a movie, and it was a movie about slaughterhouses and about that world. And she had a book called, what was John Robbins' book called? Diet for New America. And I watched the movie, and they had the cows, the large, 2,000-pound heifers, and they're hoisted up on hooks, and they're drawn up, and then somebody comes along with a chainsaw and slices through their neck or their leg, and they're still alive. And I went, oh, that's enough of that.
Yeah, you can't sit and watch something like that and still continue on the way you are. I have a big problem with grocery store meat. I was raised in a hunting family, and that's pretty much the only meat that we ate was what my father went out and got. And there was more of a respect thing with it. And I mean, something that even the natives say, and I'm not saying, oh, eat meat, eat meat. I'm like a 90-10 person, 90 veg, 10 meat, as much as possible. But something that the natives say here, the Indians say here, that I've talked to, is that that body odor that we North Americans get or whatever is due to the fact that we have rotting corpse dying inside of us. When we're eating this, the meats that we're eating give us the body odor because we have bodies digesting inside of us. That and the yeast that we're consuming because people consume far too much breads. But a lot of body odor issues. And when I found that when I went away from meat, I'm not using deodorant anyway as a rule. I use like a stone that's like a salt stone. But there was less smell. Which is
Right.
something that, I'm sorry, as a girl, it's kind of important to me.
Right. Yeah, I know when I'm around guys who eat a lot of meat, they do smell. There is an incredibly acidic, overbearing, powerful smell, and it's like, wow, you eat a lot of flesh, and you're having a lot of nitrogen in your blood in your body, and that is a nasty, nasty smell. So you do get that. You do get, of course, hippies get body odor because sometimes because they don't bathe, they eat a lot of sugar. Hippie people, so they get that sort of funky thing.
Oh, I'm laughing because it's funny.
Well, they do. I mean, hippies are accused of, and I was in a health food store, and there were these hippie kids, and they were vegan hippie kids, and they stunk. But it was a different, and they smelled dirty, but it's a different thing than a guy. I know when a guy who's a big guy, and he's a big meat eater, and he's walking around, they always wear man perfume too, which, by the way, let me explain something. Knock it off. No man needs, no, don't wear that stuff.
Okay, stop for a second. Time out. My husband puts on patchouli, and I love it, but it's not like a perfume. It's like an essential oil. So don't listen to Liam. If you want to wear patchouli, go ahead. It makes me weak in the knees.
Yes, but she's married and taken already, so don't worry about it. Let me explain something to girls. I don't know what's happening in a girl's nose, but patchouli oil to any guy I've ever met, except your husband, smells like rags that have been rotting. Now,
It does not.
smells like rags that have been in a pile and are rotting. Now, I don't know why women like patchouli oil, but they do. They like it. I will not. I like smells like cinnamon and lemon. Cinnamon and lemon.
Oh, I'm like crying. It's so funny.
They're fresh smells. But you know when men wear cologne and you're walking behind them and it's like you're in their wake, you know? It's like you're behind a big boat and you can't get out of its wake and it just spreads. I don't know why men wear that crap
Oh
except
no, you know what? You know what? You have to lump women in there too. I don't know how many times I've been somewhere and I'm following a woman who is just coated. And it's usually an elderly woman and it's a powdery old yucky chantilly smell.
perfume is nasty, nasty stuff. And all of this, by the way, will feed into the topic. Because perfume, what men do, what women do. By the way, I think that 90-10 thing, veg, animal meat, is a great ratio. And I think that if people hunted, so I live as a vegetarian, but I don't. I mean, vegetables are really good for you. They clean your blood, they clean your liver, they clean your stomach and your intestines. The fiber is a raft for the healthy bacteria to grow on. It moves material through your bowels, so you don't become, essentially an infection. And your friend who's not eating this stuff is mentally ill for a moment, and maybe you can, shake him up.
Trying.
But what's happened is it's amateur hour over here in the health sciences. Now the more people are looking at these. They don't understand what Western science is, so they read, which is what Western science is for the most part a huge load of crap, but they don't know that. So they'll read a study, and the study will say broccoli contains sulfuranone or some such small molecule. Oh, it contains this sulfur compound. Oh, this can be toxic. Yes, if you distill it from 1 gazillion pieces of broccoli into a 2-liter bottle and you drink it in 5 seconds, it could be,
This is just ridiculous.
But if you eat broccoli, actually, it's cancer preventive and it's good for you. But because they don't understand that Western science is reductionist and Western science always misses the point, they're reading these studies and they're saying, oh, did you understand this? Broccoli's dangerous for you. I knew I didn't like it. That's what I'm getting. That's what I'm dealing with on these blogs. And we've been on the Robert Scott Bell show.
That's painful. I don't understand. I mean, that just to me, it's common sense. When I was in college and I'd go out for like a night of partaking in beverages, I'd come home the next day and I'd just be suffering horribly. And do you know what I would crave? I would crave like the biggest, massive bowl of salad with like no dressing on it at all whatsoever. Just every single vegetable you can imagine because I knew I had to cleanse. My body's been very good at telling me what it needs. I don't think a lot of people listen to their bodies.
And that's the magic 3 words. Listen to, +1, meaning 4. Listen to your body. Listen to your body. I've known people on the Weston Price thing, which is a kind of quasi-religious thing. There are good things in it, but it is quasi-religious. And they'll tell you that, if you have anything, you have to drink more and more and more raw milk. Well, raw milk is mucus forming. I know you say it's not as mucus forming as pasteurized milk, but it is a mucus forming. It's generally cooling to the body, and it has a rising nature. In other words, it will cool and form mucus in your lungs. So you take this stuff, and it has an energetic nature of its own. All food has an energetic nature. Things that grow downward in a spiral have a downward spiraling nature. Things that grow upward and outward, like leaves, have an upward and outward nature, which means they relate to what? The skin, the more superficial parts of your body. Maybe the lungs, because they're intake and outtake areas for gases. That's a different way of looking at food than we do in the West. In the West, we want to make sure that this has some vitamin A, or some vitamin E, or some vitamin D. Well, in the East, from an Asiatic, Indian perspective, you look at it as an energy system. So something that burrows downward is something that will ground you, that will be good for your lower organs. Something that will add energy to you. Something that grows in cold weather, if you cook it, will sort of inure you a little bit against the cold. In other words, it has the ability to survive the cold. You eat it, you develop some of you're better equipped against the cold. That's why you don't want to eat oranges all winter because it will cool you too much. That's why you eat cabbage and potatoes and rutabagas in the winter because they are accustomed to the cold and they'll accustom your body to it. So it's a different way. Now you can do a metabolic breakdown and you could say, well, cabbage has this and broccoli has this and Florida oranges have this, and that's why you shouldn't, but you'll still be missing some of it. So I look at food energetically, and we don't do that in the West.
No, definitely not, because in the West we would call that hokey.
Yes, that's hokey. But telling people that scientifically you shouldn't eat broccoli is
That's just ridiculous.
science says broccoli is dangerous. I mean, I've lost a couple of Facebook friends and maybe one actual acquaintance because I said this is absurd. I'm so against somebody claiming to be a doctor and posting a blog saying this actually ties right in to the topic. There's a blog. It's by a Harvard psychiatrist, and she'll post blogs like, does broccoli cause cancer? Now the answer is no, but she leads with that fear-mongering tactic because she believes that we should be eating kind of a 80-20, 90-10 meat to vegetables. Because she believes the Paleolithic diet is correct or the Weston Price milk and meat diet is correct. Well, that's her belief. It's not. No human civilization that had real longevity or wasn't in extreme climactic circumstances ever ate 90% meat.
No, God, no.
Yeah,
That's a ridiculous ratio. That's just a heart attack and so many other problems waiting to happen.
It's liver congestion and it's excess.
Good Lord. I mean, really, I can't imagine consuming. Okay, I have a story to tell short. We went to this restaurant many years ago. It was called Copacabanas in Niagara Falls, Ontario. And it's not for a plug, it's for okay, watch it. Now, you go in there and there's all these beautiful Brazilian men and women, half-dressed, walking around with spears in their hand of meat. And I went with a bunch of pagans who were on this meat fetish. Let's go for somebody's birthday party. And I ate nothing but meat. And I had salad, but I ate more meat than anything else. And there was, really sexy men with shirtless doing kickboxing dances that were just making me crazy. But anyway, as we're watching this, and I'm eating, okay, fine, we decide to leave afterwards. I was sick for 2 days. I swear I had meat poisoning. It was just, I've never eaten that much meat at a sitting. Like I said, it's going back about 6-7 years ago, and it hurt my body. It taught me a lesson. You just don't do that.
Yeah, I am amazed at the amount of meat that's served in these Brazilian restaurants. I'm not sure why that is. It's excessive. It is more of the kind of aristocrat's meal because, of course, in South America, they do eat meat, but they eat rice and beans, rice and beans. All around the world, people eat rice and beans, and in the tropics, they eat plantains and tubers and, rice and beans. But somehow we have to segue back into... Oh, and the note that got me really mad on that paleo person's blog was the idea that they were telling people that they were actually hinting and playing with the notion that broccoli caused cancer. Now, if you read their blog, they're like, well, okay, we can't really say this, but they wanted you to think that. And I was very offended by that because I'm offended when people use the mantle or the title of doctor or scientist to tell other people that if they do one thing, they're going to die. I rebel against reductionist determinism. I find it to be a great modern sin. Aborigines would point bones at people and, tell who was going to have a bad fate. The Greeks would crack a pot and give somebody the person with the smallest or maybe the largest piece would be ostracized, the ostraki. And this is an ancient practice. We still do it. We now do it with this reductionist nonsense. And the thing that I likened it to, the reason I'm opposed to it, and the reason I was so upset at this broccoli thing, besides the fact that it was so stupid, was that you're putting a level of fear into people And a lot of people worship fear more than critical thinking. It's very easy to be carried away with fear. Oh no! And it's very simple. Our minds work on this method very quickly. Oh well, if broccoli's bad, I just won't eat it, and then I'll be safe.
Definitely. Well, and the first thing someone looks at in a blog is the title, and then they kind of go with that, and a lot of people don't read past the title.
Right. And then if you read hers, she would say broccoli. Her claim. She would say, "Oh well, the other people claim that broccoli is anti-cancer, is good for this, is good for that, cruciferous vegetables." She never said that the claim wasn't true, but she used that language by framing it as though some people claimed that broccoli was good for you, which she didn't refute anywhere. In other words, the claim was true. She made it sound like some people were gossiping that broccoli was good, but she was going to tell you the truth, which she couldn't do, that broccoli was bad. She wasn't actually able to do that. So it was just propaganda, and it was very lightweight propaganda. But this happens to a greater degree in the medical establishment with things like HPV. And I guess the reason why if people have forgotten what this show is supposed to be about, HIV. So there's a test that you can be given called an HIV test. And that test, if you believe it, the doctor will tell you, well, if you test positive on this test or reactive on this test, you're going to die no matter what. If you eat broccoli, you're going to get cancer. It's not true, but if you say it, you'll put fear into people. And if you say, well, if you test positive on this test for HPV, you're going to get cancer. It's not true, but people will tell you that. So then you have to go get an HPV shot, which doesn't protect you from HPV or cancer. In fact, it may cause it may be a burden, a carcinogenic burden. And then the HIV thing. Now, these are related to sex. And sex already comes fully loaded with psychological weight, historical baggage, and real danger.
Now, how can you sit there and tell us sex is dangerous? Come on now, Liam Scheff. Don't make us feel bad about sex.
Thank you for punting that to me. Yes, sex is inherently dangerous. Now, we in the West have gotten out of have gotten outside of the notion of what historically has always been well understood, which is that sex is fraught with peril. Disagree with me. Go ahead. Fight me.
How could anybody disagree? Like, there is always going to be some kind of direct result from having it, whether it's a broken heart, a baby, a disease, uncleanliness on the part of the other person, that, there's so many things that you have to look at. The first thing I've always looked at is my health and my heart. So yes, it can be dangerous.
Right. Anytime you engage in, and we've forgotten this in the West, and this happened because we got rid of the notion that sex had any meaning. And we did this somewhere from the late 50s into the early 60s. It was a pharmaceutical intervention. Sex is always dangerous. Every story that's ever written, every great drama, every great tragedy is centered around what? A relationship. Relationship between, generally a man and a woman, although I'm not, whatever it is, they're bound. And they're bound by the act which binds them the most closely, which brings them the closest to the spirit and soul of each other, and that is the sexual act. That's right. Sex is an act which brings you closer to the spirit and soul of another person. It's not just sport.
Yes, it's not just instant gratification like 95% of the North American desire for instant gratification. That's not what sex is meant for.
It's clearly a thing that binds people. That's why you have it in moments of passion and ecstasy, and that's why after you do it, you feel connected to somebody, which is why you have to be careful about who you do it with, or for whom the bell tolls, or something like that. Now, we got rid of this idea. This idea is in all of literature. Romeo and Juliet, Tristan and Isolde, Layla and Majnun. You have this story throughout Arthur and Guinevere. You have it in reality. When couples want to marry their fortunes together, they marry each other. When they want to, hook their wagons to each other's stars, they engage in a sexual relationship. It's a strong, abiding bond. If you violate the bond, you'll fight. You'll have drama. You'll have discord. If you form a bond with somebody that you don't have a lot in common with, you will have discord and you'll regret it. But we decided in the late 50s that the best thing that we could do, and I mean we, the Western model, the Western scientists decided that the best thing that we could do was to make a pill that would take the primary danger out of sex. The primary thing that binds people during sex is
procreation.
you have a kid, you don't generally forget that you had sex with somebody. You're generally bound for life in one way or another. Now, the birth control pill, which is something I grew up with culturally and is considered quite normal now, is such a rare, strange bird in human civilization. It's such an odd device to actually be able to predictably make women into equal. To make them like men is strange because men can desire sex and can have sex all day long and can want it and are more in the possession of the mind of having more with more people. But women generally, their biology predicates that they are more protective of whom they have sex with and how often they do it because it's more dangerous for them. The consequences are more severe. You get pregnant. But we've taken this away. Now sex becomes a sport. And you have the 60s, the so-called summer of love is really the summer of the pill. It's the summer of pharma. You can't have sex in these sort of group situations. You can't have sex so often if you're having children as a result of it. So what happened, the America that we now live in, is formed by a pharmaceutical concept. The idea that sex is free, the idea that sex should be everywhere all the time and has no consequence is something really that's why a lot of countries don't understand America. They don't understand how we work because we don't work. We're built on a pharmaceutical sub-basement, if you understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. I something not to disagree with you about, but something that was brought to my attention. As you know, we were talking about this earlier. I feel very connected to the indigenous ways, and I was listening to a teaching by an elder, Sylvia, and she was saying that before they came here and invaded and committed genocide against the peoples that were here, the women were not, just in their tribes, not allowed to have children until they knew certain things. And that was just a respected thing, and they knew that and they lived by it. If they didn't know how to cook, if they didn't know how to take care of their space or whatever the case is, if they didn't know how to be self-governing, they didn't have children. It was just a way of, they didn't do it. When they were with their partners and they had children, they were taking herbs in between children. They wouldn't have another child until the first child was off and running, kind of type thing. Things were a lot different than they are now. They were a lot more, when we were talking about the idea that North America is a very young and adolescent, teenage type society, the society that was here on North America was incredibly advanced before we got our hands on it. And they live in a way that I have so much respect for, lived in a way that I have so much respect for. I really do believe that there can be a balance. Unfortunately, it just doesn't exist right now. And I just wanted to, not to argue with what you're saying about, sex and responsibility or anything, but, if you're a self-governing individual, which unfortunately most North Americans aren't in this day and age, there are ways to be responsible and with sexual relationships and whatnot.
Oh, sure. Look, I'm not a Christian, and I'm not.
No, of course not.
Oh God, no, of course not. No, what I mean is, I'm not asking people to be penitent and to not have sex as something that's delightful. I agree. There are herbs which have been taken throughout history, especially in tribes, and yes, North American tribes were very advanced for not using steel, for not using metal as a tool the way Europeans did. I think probably because of the climactic differences, uh, there were great understandings of how to use the products of the world, the natural world, and there are herbs that you can take to, I don't know, either slightly offset, slightly protect against. But to have a pharmaceutical substance which you have to be on 21 days a month to make sure that you don't, within a 95% probability that you don't get pregnant is a new thing. It's
And
very.
it's not a good thing. I can say from trying it when I was, began to be sexually active for the first 3 months, like all the bad side effects that they said on that side of the pack happened to me. So I was like, okay, that's never going to happen again.
That's interesting. A lot of girls take. There are problems from them. There are problems from being alive, right? There are problems from having sex, not being on the pill. There are problems from getting pregnant, not being on the pill. There are, death in pregnancy was something that was unfortunately fairly common in Europe and especially, I want to say, England of the 1800s, 1900s, and the 20th century was riddled with high rates of infant mortality and the mother's mortality. That was a very dangerous thing to do. Maybe it was the way that childbirth was done. Maybe the difference between a tribal culture and the European English culture that we come from was that women began to become these strange objects who were always accused of having mental illnesses and physical illnesses from getting agitated. They were bound into corsets. They weren't allowed to breathe. They weren't allowed to work, or the wealthy ones weren't. The poor women were always different. They were just second class in every way. But maybe the filthiness of English hospitals, European hospitals, had a lot to do with child mortality. I'm not sure. Joni Cox from, what's the show? Homegrown Health talks about this, and she's more informed about this than I am, and I intend to learn more about it. But sex is dangerous. Procreation is dangerous. It's inherently dangerous. It's also inherently joyful. It's inherently ecstatic. It's inherently life opening, eye opening. It brings you places that you can't get in any other way. And it does. But if you lose the first part and you stop thinking that there's a necessary peril that's involved, either to your heart and getting it broken and getting attached to someone and forming these relationships, you're inherently living, and life is dangerous. If you protect yourself, or you imagine you protect yourself with the pill, I think that's why we have so many adolescent 30-year-olds, male and female, in this culture, in New York City, in North America, in Los Angeles. We have so many adolescents who are 35.
It doesn't make any sense, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like self-responsibility is just, it's been taken out of our vocabulary and our makeup.
Right, and because we're a pharmaceutically governed species. Now, what does this have to do with the HIV thing? The HIV thing came about because we stopped believing and understanding that, sex is a really serious thing. It can be a joyful, ecstatic, fun thing too, but it's also a serious thing. And when we did that, we got the Summer of Love, and that gave way very quickly to really the summer and the following years of hate, and a lot of people with really tragically toxic relationships and group experiment relationships. The tragic 70s, the fact of the spiking divorce rate in North America and United States, to the point that that half or more, maybe, what is it now, 2/3, very high rate of people who get married end in divorce. There are reasons for that. People don't know who they are when they get married. They don't have enough of a concept of what it is to be an adult in a relationship, but they also don't understand that there's some serious things involved in getting involved with people, because we've been protected. We have pharmaceutical layers around us, and we think that everything is undoable. Well, some things aren't undoable. So people jump into relationships and they think, well, it's just like the sex, and if I don't like it, I'll get rid of it. I'll put on the pill and I won't have any effects. So we're a strange, corrosive nation. The so-called liberals, or the kids who got into living a very free sexual lifestyle, so-called, and that's still the way it is on college campuses. and for liberals in their early 20s. If you go to New York or Los Angeles and you hang out with the 20-something set of heterosexuals, there's a ton of sex. There's a ton of partnering and swapping. Uh, but women are still women, and women are still generally going to be more protective of their sexual nature than men are. Men are acting in their own minds as conquistadors. They want to go out and spear as many fish as possible.
Yes, it's all about conquering.
It's all about number and conquering and the experience of it. Women sometimes don't understand that, but it's not always about conquering. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just about the experience of something new. And men are driven by that, to much more than they're driven by the experience of rooting and going deep. They just the newness of something is in itself exciting. This is a particular quality of men that has to be observed here, because the gay community, and there are always gay people, there always have been, and always will be men who are attracted to men sexually. That's just the way life is, and there are women who are attracted to women sexually. But women with women are still women by nature. They're still a little more protective. They go slower. They're about the communication. They are about talking and forming relationships. What's the joke about lesbians? What does a lesbian bring on the second date?
I don't know.
The U-Haul. They move in quickly.
They commit.
They commit quickly.
It's a nurturing thing.
It's a nurturing thing.
Yeah.
The joke about what do gay men bring on the second date? What's the answer? What second date?
Okay, we're done. Moving along now.
Yeah, that was fun, wasn't it? See you tomorrow, or maybe.
Less attachment.
Yeah, especially for young men, especially for young gay men in a society that doesn't allow them to form long-term relationships, that places no value on long-term relationships for gay men. There are no women to give them a hard time, to slow them down, to say, this is our anniversary, you moron. You don't even remember my name. I'm not going out with you anymore. You treat me like, without a woman to sort of help us mature from the instant gratification mode that's built into us. It's very natively built into us. We don't have to work at it. It's not programmed into us. It's just easily there. Even in the most sensitive males, that concept of new is exciting is really there. It's strongly there. It governs almost everything we do. I'm speaking for myself, of course.
It's more especially during the early years between the ages of, say, 16 and 25, though. When you hit your 30s, you expect that to level off and calm a bit.
And it does. It does. But some men live that way till they're 50. Some men always live that way. Most men calm down. But you said till you're 25, and then you said in your 30s. So it really can last until about 32. And again, speaking for myself, there was, and listen, I wasn't a conquistador, but I was excited by the chase and excited by the moment of achieving some interaction. It didn't always have to be intercourse, but the pleasure of falling into those moments was great. And I don't regret most of it, but I regret some of it. You have to regret some things.
Definitely.
You don't do them again.
Yeah.
Right. Gay men didn't have this. They also didn't have normative communities where they would get married and buy houses and have children or adopt children or have dogs and mortgages and careers. Gay men were brutalized, physically brutalized, murdered in New York, in Los Angeles and other cities. They were brutalized if they came out. They had to live in undergrounds. They went to essentially, after-hour speakeasies. And this was going on through the 50s. By the late 60s, while the young white teenage suburban, liberal kids were screwing their brains out and sort of getting away with it and calling it, a revolution, gay men went, really? What about us? And by 1969, a date that lives in no ironic infamy, there were the Stonewall riots, and gay men said, no, we're coming out too. So through the 70s, gay men came out in their inner city ghettos, But inner city ghettos are just that. They can be decent apartments or they can be lousy apartments, but they're essentially college dormitories that you live in through your 20s and 30s when you're living in an inner city apartment. It's a misery in a way. Uh,
Hmm.
that's the only place you get to be you. That in the club where you're hooking up and huffing poppers. Well, okay. In order for gay men to have the amount of sex that men will have as much sex from the ages of 16 to 28 as they're able to.
Makes a lot of sense.
They'll just do it.
I mean, no, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I remember.
Right. That's the way we are. That's the way we're built. Men will just do that.
Well,
If
it's the idea of procreating, though, too. It's like a driven force between those ages to get as many of the boys out of the camp to solidify that need and desire to procreate, too, is it not?
Mhm.
Regardless of choice of sexual orientation.
Oh, absolutely. This is just the nature of the male. And there are women out there who have more of this, and there are men who have more of the feminine nature. So I'm not,
Sure.
but gay men are men. And the only difference between a gay man and a straight man is women. That's it. The only difference is that women slow us down. And men do certain things for women, and women do certain things for men. But there's something that's not understood in gay culture, which is that long-term stabilizing relationships should be a goal. But young men going out in the gay communities, in their ghettoized communities, even if they're pretty and upscale like West Hollywood, are in a ghetto. You're in a ghetto, and you have the app on your iPhone. There is one. I can't quite recall the name right now, but it allows you and anybody using it to find the closest location to find somebody to have sex with. This is a popular phone app in the gay community.
Yes, it is.
It is. I there was nothing like this for me when I was a teenage boy because girls looked at us like we were freaking idiots.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Oh, you're so stupid. Oh, you don't listen. You're so gross. Why do you think that's funny? Boys understood boys. So if I was a male attracted to other men and I'm 18, 19 and I'm out on my own because mom and dad didn't accept me anyway, so I ran away from home and I live in these inner city ghettos, I'm going to have as much sex as I can. And that's going to be a lot of sex. That's going to be 10, 20 guys a week, a night. And in order to have that much sex, I'm going to start taking these drugs called poppers, which are going to let me have erections for hours, that are going to let me have receptive anal sex without tearing anything. It's going to dilate my blood vessels and I'm going to be able to have longer orgasms. And in order to deal with all of this, I'm going to have to take amphetamines to stay up because I'm going to get really tired. So I'm definitely going to have to take amphetamines. But, I'm also going to have to take downers because I'm going to get really wired. I might as well have some pot and I might as well drink. And if somebody has some Coke, I'm definitely going to do that because it's a good time. It's a party. But what I really need now is some antibiotics because I'm afraid I have some parasites and I think I have 3 STDs. I think I have a couple kinds of chlamydia and gonorrhea in my mouth and in my anus. But that's life, and life is a good time. So I'm going to keep having the good time. Lord knows there is no future for being a gay man. That's the way that it was thought. It was always, it's you can find gay men will tell you if they're being honest. Older gay men will say, yeah, they want to die. What was the goal? To have a beautiful corpse.
That's exactly it. Exactly it. Live hard and fast and leave a beautiful corpse.
Exactly. Live hard, fast, and leave a beautiful body behind. Well, it's what's not valued. Living long, living healthily, having stabilizing relationships, growing more mature, gaining prestige in your work, gaining prestige in the community. It's not there. It's just not there for them. This is the fault of the culture. This isn't the fault of gay men that it's not there for them.
No, it's definitely the culture. When I was when I was in my college course for journalism, I had to do a profile on anybody in the community, and I chose somebody with HIV who lived down the hall from me, who used to be a model, a runway model, and he got, well, autoimmune deficiency syndrome in the thick of it. And he told me, I mean, I'll have to dig it out and share it with you, but it was nothing but lots and lots of orgies, unprotected sex, drugs, many, many, many men altogether. The bathhouses, the when I looked at the pills that he was taking, it's like every single one of them designed to just tear him apart so there'd be nothing left in the end. Just sad.
And that's it. And you could go from journalist to journalist to journalist who honestly covered the gay community at that time, and they'll tell you the same story. Nobody who was alive and observing life at that time, or who knows gay men who were living at that time and who's spoken with them candidly about this, that's the story. That's what happened. So the idea now we have to get to the idea that there's a new sex virus that occurs in the late 70s or early 80s that affects who? Gay men. Oh, what is well, if we just look at the geography, if we look at the epidemiology, the actual life of the people living, we go, well, they didn't have any particular virus. They were what were those antibiotics doing? They were tearing apart their intestines. What do the intestines do? The intestines digest food. The mucosal layer protects your blood from the pathogens in your food and the air that you take into your stomach. Oh, that's interesting. So these guys who drilled holes in their intestines and ripped out the mucosal layer, who did high powered, this is another thing they did. They did high powered shower enemas in the baths, the gay baths. The receptive partners would, and they'd have a dildo looking apparatus that attached to a shower head, and you'd put it into your colon. You'd wash out your colon. Now, your colon contains a mucosal layer that's meant to protect you from what? Absorbing poison, and it allows you to pass stool without, damaging anything. Well, they would wash this out. Why? Because they were the receptive partner and they wanted to be clean, hygienically clean. They would then put a lubricant in there, a variety of petroleum-based lubricants that contain something called benzene, which is a known carcinogen. So they washed out the protective layer, they put in a carcinogen. Guess what happens? They got sick. They got really sick over a few years, from 74, 79. By 81, a lot of them were sick and many people were dying. And they looked old. And as John Lawrence said, gray in the face, gray-faced and drawn and
Very,
pale.
very gaunt.
Yeah. Well, what do you eat? How much do you eat when you're on amphetamines and poppers and having sex all night long and doing drugs all night long in the club? You don't.
I'm glad you answered that because I just couldn't put myself there.
You don't. You don't eat when
No,
you're
I can't imagine. You just starve yourself. Your body is absolutely starving for everything. And then when you actually do stop to eat, your body can't take in any of the nutrients because your stomach lining that would be there isn't. Therefore, you're starving yourself on all levels.
right, and you're living in LA or Paris or New York, so you don't eat anything really good. You go down to the whatever, you stand up and have a piece of pizza or you have some sort of sandwich. That you're not eating highly nutritious, as they say, nutrient-dense food. You're not eating probiotic food.
And let's just remind the listeners right now that we're talking about, like, the late 70s, early 80s, going like throughout the 80s into the early 90s. It's not like we're talking about right now.
Well, I am.
Oh,
You go and hang out with the gay community, and I've spent time with a lot of people and spoken to older and younger guys in the gay community. You will find that this is still the way.
it's
Now,
still going on. See, that surprises me, but maybe it's because who I surround myself with. My gay friends take very good care of themselves, and they're like juicing it and stuff, you know?
yes, that's not a sexual joke. The juicing it. No, no, no. There are some aspects of the gay community which are still living the fast lane lifestyle. Now they'll take vitamins along with it. Now they'll take juice along with it. But there is still the fast lane, I suppose, is the way I should say it more correct.
Sure, I gotcha.
Fast
I
lane.
live a sheltered life somehow. I don't
Well, that's
understand that, but yeah.
okay. It's surprising here, but there are large circuit parties. They're called circuit parties that people go to. There are the white party. There it's called. There everybody wears white, or white is the theme, or the black party. Everybody wears black. There are large national, international roving circuit parties for gay men, and the drugs flow, the poppers flow, probably the antibiotics still flow. But now what has changed? In the early 80s, a lot of these guys were getting sick. They went to They were sick in LA and New York. Well, this speaks very clearly against the notion that this is a standard STD. It says this is population specific. And the first analysis was called gay-related immune deficiency. It was really gut-related immune deficiency, but it was gut-related in gay men, young male homosexuals. This was not considered. This was considered politically off-putting to people in the gay community who wielded some power, and they made a huge fuss. And they said, "Well, it can't be about just us having sex; it has to be about everybody having sex." So the move was then decided to find something that could be blamed that was sexual but didn't relate to young gay men living a very specific kind of lifestyle in a very specific society. It then had to be a heterosexual problem. And the notion of a new STD was put forward, and guys who'd been, like Robert Gallo, guys who'd been researching ways to, these guys had spent the last 10 years, all of the 70s, with on Richard Nixon's war on cancer. They were trying to find a virus that would cause cancer, and viruses don't cause cancer. Viruses generally aren't even what we think of as viruses. Nobody really knows. They're things inside of cells. They're cellular messengers during cellular breakdown. They're engineers of genetic change inside the body. They're necessary. Sometimes they pass from species to species, and maybe they wreak a little havoc for a little while, then they all straighten out, and it's not a big deal anymore. Plagues happen very quickly. Plagues happen over 2 or 3 years. Even the Great Plagues happened, over 8 or 10 years was the majority of the thing over an entire continent. When people weren't traveling that much, the majority of people in real historical plagues die quickly, not 35 years. So you don't have a 35-year plague unless it's a chemical plague, unless it's an environmental plague, an ongoing environmental plague. But the way that biology works is if there's some new vector, real thing, that was transported on rats from another country that had gotten used to a certain kind of animal agriculture, and it's introduced into a new country, if people are going to get sick, it'll be about a year of real bloodletting, maybe 2. And then guess what? A lot of people were already resistant to it, and a lot of people become resistant to it. That's the way biology works out. But we've been told that there's a new, it's still new and dangerous STD called HIV. Here's a question. How do you know you're HIV positive? Here's a, how do you,
I'm sorry. Test upon test upon test upon test.
How do you know that you have gonorrhea?
I don't know. You go get a test. I don't know, because I've never had these issues.
You have gonorrhea, it hurts, it itches.
Aha.
How do you know chlamydia? It hurts.
If you said bladder infection, I'd be like, okay, it hurts.
How do you know you have a bladder infection? How do you know?
It hurts. You get irritated. You're irritated. There's an irritation. I should just knew the answer, but I was like, I don't know. I've never had gonorrhea.
Or pus coming out of your...
Blah! Yay, let's talk about this some more.
How do you know you have an STD? You have bumps on your genitals.
Yeah, bumps on your bits.
You do. And that's how you know. Now, how do you know you're HIV positive?
Well, it's a sickness. You feel like you're ill, I would assume.
No. How do you know you're HIV positive?
Oh, not until you get a test, and they tell you so.
In order for you to know that you're HIV positive, a doctor has to tell you. There's nothing that occurs on your genitals because it's not an STD. It's a virus of the brain. You think that you have it, and so you believe that you have it, and certain doctors with certain tests will tell you that you're HIV positive, and if you believe it, you'll take drugs that they call AIDS drugs, which happen to destroy your bone marrow and liver and your stomach, which means that the drugs kill you. This is all well known and well established in the medical literature. That's an interesting phenomenon. Now, they invented a test. They took these gay guys. Actually, Robert Gallo took 10 of these gay guys. He took samples from 10 guys. He pooled those samples together, which is, in the medical sciences, absolute pure mental illness. You're not allowed to pool 10 samples together and call it anything. But he did.
That is just bizarre.
and this is well established again in the standard medical literature. He pulled these together and he mixed them with cancer cell line cells, with white leukemia cells that they called immortal cell lines. And these cells were white blood cells called T cells. In other words, they never died and they were called T cells. And then he said then that the thing that he was going to blame for what happened in the gay guys killed T cells. One more time, he had these immortal cell lines of white blood cells called T cells that never died. He then said that there was something in them that killed T cells. Do not collect $200. You're done at that point. It's beyond stupid. You can't say that something kills something that's growing in the thing that it kills and never dies. It's just really dumb. But that's what he said. He mixed the white blood cells that he said were immortal T cells with the samples from the 10 guys. He pulled out some proteins. It's very voodoo stuff. You don't really know what you're looking at. He just pulled out some proteins by spinning beakers around, by spinning vials around, by spinning them through sucrose density gradients, by spinning them and pulling out the liquid parts that he assured himself had some proteins in them. Then he took some of that stuff that you can't really see, put it onto paper, put a light electric current through it, separated the proteins a little bit, and said that this is an HIV test.
Nonsense.
Well, that's what happened.
But it's nonsense. It's absolutely ridiculous to think that somebody's going to turn around and do tests like this and studies like this and just pull it out of their arse.
And out of Robert Gallo's arse it came, and out of Anthony Fauci, who's head of the NIH. These guys understood probably what they were doing was fraudulent, but they were on a trail that they'd been on for 10 years. They had run out of funding for the virus cancer stuff because viruses don't cause bloody cancer. Cancer is a long-term toxicological problem. There's no single cause. The starvation of your cells by forming plaques, by building huge fatty deposits that starve, and toxic deposits that starve parts of your body for oxygen. There are many ideas about what cancer actually is, but it's not a one-shot deal. It's something you accrue. It's something you essentially earn over time. But they wanted to pin it on something that could be transmissible because why? If you can pin it on one thing, you can sell a vaccine for it.
Definitely. And it's all about vaccines, vaccines, vaccines.
You can sell a drug for it.
Yeah.
And then you can tell everybody that they need to be vaccinated at $150, $400 per, with many booster shots. And then on the bottom of the vaccine, you can say this vaccine does not protect against the kind of cancer that we say it protects against, which is what they all say. The HPV thing says, no, this doesn't stop HPV. And then if you read the data, it says, no, HPV doesn't cause cancer. Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. HPV occurs in 70-80% of human beings, and cervical cancer occurs in 0.016% of human beings. Are we done with the causation argument? Something that occurs in 80% of people doesn't cause cancer in 0.001% of people.
But Liam, what gives you the authority to be able to speak on any of this? Where did you do your research?
Absolute common sense. You don't have to trust anything I say. You're free to do the research. It's in my book, by the way.
This is more for the listeners, that question, than for myself, because I've spoken to you and I've read your book, so I'm on point with you, but there's those people saying, oh, well, what does he know?
You're free to say that. The question is, I don't know anything that you can't know.
Exactly. And that's something that I tried to stress in my show yesterday and in several shows, is that the people that are here talking are no different than any of you listening. So please continue.
You should be doing your own research. Anything I say, you can go and look up. It is in my book, and I do tell you how I got to that research, and I point you to hundreds, maybe thousands of pieces of medical literature that you can be examining. I did that work. I do that work. I've done that work. But I didn't come about this lightly. I didn't come to it, fleetingly, or I didn't come to it whimsically, I should say. I came to it through, resistance and argument and having to be convinced. The narrative assembled itself slowly from pieces of information that I accrued from interviewing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and reading hundreds of pieces of testimony and hundreds and maybe thousands of medical articles. My book is, by the way, called Official Stories. This is chapter 5 and 6 that we're talking about, chapter 5 on vaccines and chapter 6 on HIV/AIDS, which I call AIDS is vaccination and AIDS are both religious sciences. Vaccination is the concept of baptism. You take these children, inject them with stuff that you accrued from, that you culled out of animal kidneys, monkey testicles and ovaries, hamster testicles and ovaries, and you mixed with metals, and then you inject it into very small bodies, and you expect good things to happen. That's a religious science. HIV is the new scarlet letter. We don't have prohibitions on, we don't have a normal way to look at sex anymore. So the HIV concept comes along and goes, okay, we need a rule. Here's the rule. Make sure you have talked to the person you're with about their sexual life, because we don't have any rules. So at least have a conversation. Do you think you're HIV positive? No, no, no. It gets you to divulge who you've had sex with. It gets you to talk about sex as a potentially dangerous thing. You see, that's what it's for, because there's no science to it. There never has been any science to it. The gay guys got sick because of the way they were living. That's a bloody fact. And you can find gay men who said we were getting sick and we knew we were getting sick and we knew we were going on and going to get sick. Then the mainstream came along and rescued them, and really, I think, cursed them with this notion of a one cause of illness. Now, HIV tests, Cari, they come up positive. What are they? If HIV tests actually tested for something, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Well, no, of course not, because nobody would have HIV.
If you actually looked at if you look at HIV tests and you look at the medical literature, which you can do on the links that will be accompanying this blog at Reduce the Burden or Alberta Reappraising AIDS Society, or go through the medical journals and PubMed and find HIV false positives, If you look through the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of medical literature on what makes HIV tests come up positive, you'll find that HIV tests come up positive for everything. Everything. Any known condition.
It's complete hoodoo. Like, it's junk. It's junk science, and they're using it constantly. And I don't understand. It's like that. It's like the cancer test when girls have to go in for their paps. Okay, they go in for their pap smear, and they get to test their cancer cells in their body and whatnot. Do you know that for 2 years they had me on pins and needles? And the thing is that they do these tests to the girls, and they take their swab sample, and then they call you after they get the results back, and they say, oh, there's abnormal cells, blah, blah, blah. You have to be petrified for the next 6 months that you might have cancer until we can turn around and retest you again once the cells regrow. I went through 2 years of that fear before I started really educating myself in the fact that none of this is actually even true. I don't even go to the doctor for that anymore.
The kinds of the medical tests are devices. They're technology. Like any technology, they have to be examined for their value, their validity. So you wouldn't use an AM radio to try to watch TV. And if somebody sold you an AM radio and said you can watch satellite TV on this, you'd say thanks. I'm going to keep walking. Now, we don't examine medical technology this way. We just trust doctors. But if you look at these tests, these HPV, these HIV tests, it will tell you, and it says on the inside of HIV tests, and I'll just read the quote, at present, this is from the major test from Abbott Labs they bought the patent from Robert Gallo in 84 or 5. This is from the major producer of HIV tests for 30 odd years. At present, there is no recognized standard for establishing the presence or absence of antibodies to HIV in human blood. One more time. This is an HIV test, right? At present, there is no recognized standard for establishing the presence, whether you do or absence or do not have antibodies to the thing they say the test tests for.
So if they tell you that it's crap.
In other words, this is not an HIV test. Don't believe us. And then they say clinical studies continue to clarify and refine the interpretation and the medical significance of the presence of antibodies to HIV. That line contradicts the first line, which says this test does not tell you whether you have the presence or absence. They tell you then that they don't know the medical significance of having what they tell you that they can't find. It's like a joke. Except this joke is enforced on whom? Gay men and brown-skinned people. And you may ask, well, what about Africa? Well, yeah, what about Africa? Here's my answer to that. Shut off your water in your house and pull the water out of your toilet for a week. Okay.
And let Bill Gates immunize you. Because you know those immunizations are compromising their health on top of that.
And let somebody inject you with stuff grown in labs mixed with aluminum and mercury. Sorry, thimerosal. It's still in there. And other heavy metals, adjuvants like squalene, which cause massive inflammatory responses. Let somebody inject you with that, pull the water out of your toilet. And if you think I'm being unkind, I'm sorry. Why don't you go do a little research on what it's like to not have clean water and then figure out how much of sub-Saharan Africa doesn't have clean, safe drinking water. Then you say, what about malaria? Aha, what about the tropics? Yes, malaria, the disease that the people who went into the tropics thought was caused by bad air, malaria. No, it was actually caused by a parasite, spirochete, carried by mosquitoes that live in the tropics. Because when the water is stagnant, these things grow there. When the water is running and, cleaned a little bit, they don't grow there. Why don't we have these diseases here? Because we have, for all the crap that we put in our water before the fluoride and the chlorine, we had water irrigation systems. We would essentially wash the water. I know that sounds funny, but we'd pass it through filters and we'd keep it moving, and you put some chemicals in it to destroy insect larvae. But what do you have in sub-Saharan Africa, where you have no economy, where you have nations that have been machined by the World Bank, now by the World Health Organization? You have Bill Clinton building HIV test plants, the Clinton Foundation in Africa and China, where the poorest people in the world live, but you don't have clean, bloody water facilities going in. You don't have windmills going in to make a little electricity. You don't have water cleaning systems. You don't have pumps. You have children drawing water out of ditches that are also the ditches where the fecal matter goes. So now you understand Africa. Well, the World Health Organization, now that's not all of Africa. They're big, beautiful, gleaming cities and a lot of people living in luxury, but not the majority, and not the poor people. Poor people in America, and I don't mean homeless poor. I mean, people who don't have a lot of money can rent an apartment or have a house that's been in the family, and they'll have relatively clean, at least malaria-free drinking water. You understand what I'm saying? Tuberculoid-free drinking water, because we're not in the tropics. And we filled in the swamps here. Washington, D.C. was a swamp. There were malaria epidemics, in America, North America. Tuberculosis and malaria happened here in large volume. Tuberculosis was a huge thing here. But what did we do? We put the sewage underground. We got rid of it. We got it out of our houses. And we brought the clean water in through pipes. The pipes were sometimes lead and created their own problems. But we didn't have the problem of infectious water anymore. Now, the World Health Organization in 1985 held a meeting in the Central African Republic, the old Congo, where King Leopold waged his war on the people, and decided that AIDS in Africa from 85 on would be defined by diarrhea, fever, weight loss.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, but that's it. And AIDS in Africa for 35 years, has been anybody who has a bloody cold and loses some weight. You have HIV, you have AIDS. You don't test over there. You don't do tests. So AIDS in Africa is poverty in Africa. It's essentially what we would call the third world problem. And if you remember, am I a little older than you? You remember Sally Struthers used to do...
Yeah, I do. I remember. All of her. She got really, really large, right? That's the one that used to be on Archie Bunker, yes?
Sally Struthers was a funny actress. She was on All in the Family as Bunker's daughter, Gloria.
You have better couth than I do, eh?
No, it's fine. She became big. She got to be a very big girl, and she decided that she cared very much about African children and orphans and people who were starving to death. And she would do these commercials for, I don't know if it was Oxfam or something. And she'd go over and she'd say $1 a day, $1 a week, $1 a month.
Wasn't it like Christian Life Network or something? Oh, I don't know. It doesn't even matter.
That's the right track.
Yeah.
$5 a month will feed 10 children. It was an outrageously small amount of money to give some people some nutrition. And she was, mocked and made the object of ridicule by comedians in America. Well, that was the 70s. That was the late 70s, early 80s. What changed? When did that become a sex disease? That these children were starving, that their parents were starving, that the countries had been riddled by warfare.
The minute they realized they could market it
as a sex disease. And it fit all our old biases. Black people and sex. Need I say more? How many old biases are there about black people and sex?
Oh, it's just sad.
There are so many. Don't have sex with a black person. If you have sex with a black person and you're pregnant, the baby will be so large it will destroy you, it will kill you. That was a late Elizabethan, that was something that was thought into the 20th century. Don't have sex with a brown-skinned person. They have all kinds of diseases. They're wild. They're not Christian. They're not Christian.
A lot of that, they really put them as being these almost like savages.
Animals, yeah.
Animals, yeah.
Now, Europeans who've lived like animals for a long time, if you look at Victorian London, you'd say, well, it's really a mess. If you look at New York City today, we Americans, we're all the same bloody species. The difference is geography, climate, whether you have clean water. That's more or less it. That's how we develop. Religion, philosophy, economy has so much to do with geography. That should be a major principle of our studies, but we don't understand that. So we really think people are really different. No, we're the same species. We're the same species everywhere. So we have the HIV test, which comes up positive for everything and has no standards. And we have AIDS drugs, which destroy your bone marrow and your stomach and your gut. They will kill microbes. So if you're a gay man and you're infected by microbes and yeast because you've been destroying your body, you'll feel a flush of relief when you begin to take the lower dose anti-protein drugs, protease inhibitors. And then the protein drugs will start to work on you and you'll start to waste away. And the doctors will say that the drugs are no longer being effective and the HIV is mutated. Well, no, this is what's supposed to happen when you take drugs that dismantle the proteins in your body. You will waste away. So, that's the social history of the thing.
Now, I have to interject, not interject, but I just was brought a quote, and it says, when a well-packaged web of lies has been sold gradually to the masses over generations, the truth will seem utterly preposterous, and its speaker a raving lunatic. And that's Dresden James. Now, anybody speaking out against, like, what we're talking about right now, a lot of the major population are going to say, you guys are idiots. You're crazy. Even though it sounds completely logical, even though that there's proof there, even though that there's well-documented information for them to find on their own, Liam, how are we going to get past the idea that people are going to think we're raving lunatics?
Oh, I never worry about that. It's not my problem. Listen, I don't worry about that because I'm not here to fix the world. I just like to know what's true. So I don't care. People, that's fine. Make me famous, call me a raving lunatic on your blog. It's fine. Honestly, it doesn't bother me. Because the question is, what do HIV tests test for? It's just very simple. You always bring it back down to the details. And then you go look up HIV tests and you realize that they test for hundreds and hundreds of things. And you have no idea what they test for. Then you say, well, AIDS drugs save lives. Okay, what do AIDS drugs do? Let's just go look at a few studies. Oh, they killed more children. Oh, they caused this person to die. Oh, they caused all of these people to die. Oh, when AZT was introduced in the gay community in 87, the number of AIDS deaths was going down to around 10, 11,000 per year. What happened when AZT, a drug that kills bone marrow and livers and stomachs, a failed chemotherapy drug, what happened when this blood cell killing, bone marrow killing drug was introduced in high doses into the gay community? That's interesting. The death rate quadrupled, then quintupled. Oh, that's interesting. 150,000 gay men died only in a few years when they were given AZT. And then they took AZT out of that population and reduced it and you weren't allowed to give it in high doses anymore. Guess what happened? The death rate returned to what it was before AZT. Huh. That surely seems interesting if you want to talk about all of the people in this country who died of, put your fingers in the air, AIDS, quote unquote. That's interesting.
What do we do now, though?
So, raving lunatic, that's fine. That's just a name.
Well, where do we go from here? What do we do when we What's the solution here? That's what I'm looking for right now. What is the solution to this epidemic? Because it's an epidemic. It's a ridiculous problem. Our government, our health organizations are feeding us a pack of lies, telling us that we're dying because, okay, first of all, a solution is to be more responsible sexually, obviously, and to understand that sex is a sacred bond created by two people that carries a deep responsibility that people should be taking seriously. That to me is one of the most, it's a spiritual experience. Okay, fine. What about the rest of it?
Um, yeah, you do like the. All I can say is that I'll.
Have I stumped you?
Oh, I just don't. It's not really a question I ask myself. It's crowd psychology. Men, it has been said, think in herds. It will be seen that they go mad in herds, while they only recover their senses slowly and one by one. I think that this is an important idea. I'm not. Your show is called Lifting the Veil. We lift the veil on ourselves. We lift it one at a time. We only lift
Definitely.
our veil. Then you can only be a beacon in your world. That's all you can be. I I might have a different worldly I don't worry about fixing the world. The world doesn't have to be fixed for me to be okay. I don't even have to change the world. I really, it's more self-serving. I like finding out what's true. So if you're turned on by the information or tuned into it or you like it, then talk about it and read about it and argue it and find both, whatever you want to find in terms of criticism and really look at the mainstream and see if their arguments have held up. And if you know that it's a lie, then you do, and you can just talk about it. I talk about it freely. I mean, I don't couch it. I mean, if I'm talking about this, they say, oh, yeah, yeah, HIV tests are fake and they test for everything and, drugs will cause immune deficiency. I always say immune deficiency is quite real. You can acquire immune deficiencies through many means, and you can heal from it too. So the idea that I don't believe in HIV testing. I know it exists, but what I'm saying is I think it's a crime. I think it's a modern slavery, and I oppose it. I think that if you come to understand this information and you read the medical literature and you say, and they'll tell you that HIV tests have no standard, then it's a very simple line to understanding that HIV tests should be banned. There's no use for them. They're a criminal venture. Uh, and that's just something I think and something I say. I'm not here to fix anybody. I know that's strange. It's not my job.
No, no, no. I don't think that we're here necessarily to fix anybody, but I like to provide a solution to the problems that we expose or the issues that are exposed. And you answered it very well. I mean, it's just talking about it, getting the information out there, not being afraid to speak about it, and doing your own research.
Let me add to this the real solution I can offer is the solution I offer to anybody who's getting involved in politics. Stop. If you're getting involved in Republican versus Democrat or Democrat versus Republican, stop. Stop it. I really mean it. Just stop. If you're getting involved in AIDS politics and you want to stop the AIDS machine, stop. The most important political thing you can do in your entire life is to take care of yourself, is to learn about health, is to learn how to eat. I'm very serious about this, is to learn how to cook, is to learn how to garden, is to learn how to build things at home that make home work. The most important thing you can build at home, though, is your blood and your mind. So you have to figure out what food is. You have to figure out how to nurture your gut. You have to figure out how to get away from the destructive chemicals, the antibiotics, the regular use pharmaceuticals, which will definitely help cause immune deficiency in you. Now, if you're gay, you might be called AIDS, and if you're not, you might be called chronic fatigue or lupus, there are all kinds of names for a series of the same illnesses, inflammatory illnesses generally caused by vaccines, exposure to pesticides, metals, are now lupus or fibromyalgia. Immune deficiency is called chronic fatigue syndrome or chronic immune deficiency or AIDS. Now they have pediatric immune deficiency, PIDS. Why are children so sick? Why? Because they're eating poison and we're injecting them with poison.
And we're cleaning around them with poisons. That's another big thing. I had Angela Foreman on the show, and she had found that the chemicals that they're using in the schools are killing our kids. They're making them sick. Have you ever wondered why kids go to school and all summer long they're healthy as an ox, and they go to school and 5 weeks later everybody's getting sick?
Yes, we're exposed to poisons everywhere. Really, that's very important. We used to spray children with DDT. Blame that for polio, not some stomach bug that doesn't cause anything. We used to spray children with DDT. This is dioxin-containing substance that's produced by companies like Monsanto. We don't get it. We're not. The reason that people like to blame viruses is very simple. If you blame a virus, as my friend and fellow researcher Janine Roberts said, if you blame a virus, it's you can't sue industry. It's easy to blame a virus. It's helpful to industry to blame a virus because then industry doesn't have to be responsible. We don't have to be chemically responsible. We don't have to be responsible for the chemicals we spray on our children, on ourselves, on our food, the chemicals we put into our food. And we can even convince ourselves that genetically modifying our food might not be bad for us. Well, right. Madness, right? So we do live in that madness. So I think the most important political act you can ever do is to take yourself and your health as seriously as you can. Not sanctimoniously, but seriously. To learn about.
No, it's definitely something. What you put into your body is exactly who you're going to be. And your body is your temple, and you have to take care of it, and you have to take it seriously, and you can't think that anybody else is going to know better than you what it needs.
There's an expression, you are what you eat. I believe it comes from a French gastronome, but I think the closer to the translation is, show me what you eat, and I'll tell you what you are.
It makes so much sense. You said something to me in our interview the last time we spoke, one of the last times we spoke. And it was that I had said that alcohol was the gateway drug. We were talking about hemp and cannabis. And you said, no, it's sugar. And yeah. I actually sat on that for quite a bit. And it really, I don't think I realized just how true it was. That first thing that you have as a child that gives you withdrawal is sugar. And it's killing everybody.
Yes, sugar is the gateway drug in our culture. It's the gateway drug to instant gratification, to incredible moodiness and depression, to ennui and melancholy that we then seek brain-altering pharmaceuticals for when the problem is bloody well in our intestines. And yeah, sugar is the gateway drug. It shortens our attention span. It gets us easily addicted to the beta waves of television. Refined white sugar is frankly a nightmare. The fact that it's in everything.
Well, and corn syrup's poison too. Those two are the two top no-nos in my house. There's no corn syrup and there's no white sugar.
Right. Not that some sweet things are fun.
Honey. I like honey. I'm a honey girl.
Sure. But remember that in the ancient world, these things were what? Rare. It was hard to get. You could have fruit in the hot seasons. You could have squash in the cold seasons. There was no white sugar. It didn't exist for almost all of human civilization.
No, there was only honey. That was it.
And honey is hard to get. Honey is a rare, expensive, valuable commodity that's produced seasonally by experience.
Very true.
Can't have gallons of honey. And people who use honey and replacing sugar by the same volume, not correct. You actually use very little.
Poo-poo all over my stuff, eh?
Sorry, buddy.
I'm only kidding. I'm glad you do.
Oh.
Someone's got to do it.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to poo-poo on your honey, especially in your honey.
No, it's ew. It's all good.
Coated.
Boy, didn't that paint a nice mental picture.
I think we've hit 2 hours. I think this was fun.
I love talking to you, and I think the listeners are really going to appreciate the conversation and the truth. Because, I've always had my doubts about the whole HIV/AIDS thing. It just seemed too perfect. Oh, yes, all the gay people. They're bad. Look they've got a smite from God. Because that's how a lot of people looked at it, right? It was just another reason to hate the gays.
Well, that's why it worked, you see. That's why people were willing to accept it because even though they said it was anybody could get it, if you really talk to a doctor, they said, well, your greatest risks are from if you're a drug injector or a male homosexual. Now, I think that we should wrap it up. But if I sent you a few links, and if these can be posted with the show, you can review the sex studies with so-called HIV. Remember, there's nobody is HIV positive. They were given a test that doesn't test for anything, and the doctors decided to call them HIV positive. Why? Because they were in a risk group. So you have to be black or gay for an HIV. Doctors will tell you to get an HIV test if you're a gay man. If you're a white middle-class college kid who's been screwing his brains out or her brains out in a dormitory and you have a cold, they'll tell you to rest and to have some chicken soup. And that's the difference.
See, that wasn't in the 90s. That wasn't true. I remember them saying, because we were like, I mean, my girlfriends talked very openly about sex, and we were all being told to get HIV tests.
By whom?
By our doctors.
Did you?
No, I never did.
Okay. All right.
I didn't believe it. How can you? Okay, well, even if I do get it, you could tell me that it's a negative, but it has up to 10 years to change into a positive. That makes no sense.
Right. Well, they don't even say. They don't say that. They just lie.
But that's what they told us. That's what we were told here. That's the propaganda we were told here, is that HIV could lay dormant for 10 years. So even if you got the test, you had to get tested like every 6 months or something ridiculous. It was just,
yes, but they don't enforce it on young. They don't enforce it on young college kids.
Oh, not anymore. I think this was like an early 90s thing, right?
Well, listen, maybe for a week or so. Maybe when all the gay men were dying on AZT, they said we should, but they didn't increase testing.
Yeah.
Or they did very mildly. And if you read the medical literature on testing, they'll say, actually, this comes about in 2000, so maybe there's something to what you're saying. They say if we test more people who aren't at risk, we're going to increase our false positive rate to the point that the tests we can't use anymore. They have no meaning. In other words, the tests come up positive for everything, so we can only use them on the people who we say HIV.
Well, isn't that convenient?
Right.
Oh, well, what are we going to do? It's time to wrap up the show. Thank you so much for coming on. It's always a delight. I know that I've learned something. I know that the listeners are going to learn something. And what they do with it is completely up to them. But I thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, it's all in the book, chapter 5 and 6. We get into other things in the book like Big Bang Theory. We can talk about that another time. Like what the sciences say about a lot of things really are quasi-religious in nature and don't bear out in the evidence. So it's one of the things I talk about. Official Stories, Liam Scheff, Amazon.com.
Now, we could totally talk about every single topic and do a bunch of shows, but then maybe nobody would read. I'd rather people read.
Yes, go read.
Please, everybody, go and sit and read. It's good for your brain. And while you're at it, write something too, because you never know what poetry might come out of your fingertips. Now, that being said, thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Lifting the Veil with Cari-Lee. Today has been an interesting and very, very educational show with Liam Scheff, author of Official Stories. Please check him out. Please support and purchase the book. You won't regret it. And then share it. Until next we speak, peace.